Virginia here. So today I want to create a video that will act as a refresher for people that are taking my stitch class at the Northwest Basket Weavers Convergence coming up in April. We've got a full class and there are a few on the waiting list as well. So in case there's anybody that misses it or needs a refresher, I want to show what we will be doing in that class. So at this point, if you're taking this class, you should be an intermediate basket weaver. So you should know how to start a basket, so I won't spend a lot of time on that, but we will be going ahead and just setting up our baskets as normal. Our first row will be just the regular stitch or basic stitch. So everyone should know how to do that, and there shouldn't be a problem with that. So I'm kind of just working through the way that I do it. People have other ways, but I generally take about 5 or 6 pine needles, tie them off, go through the first hole, and I usually start on the side of a basket, but this really has no perfect sides. It's all the same measurements around. So I'm just going to start right there. And generally, if you're going to make changes to a basket, you know, start a new stitch, I generally start where I started the basket. Now this is our first hole, so I like to go down twice just to make sure it's very secure. You don't have to do that, but that's what I like to do. So just set up the start of your basket the way you normally do, or the best way you're comfortable. So I always like to make sure when I'm starting a basket that I have a nice size tail. So the reason being behind that is it's still a little loose here. You know, we haven't totally tied it down. There's no other stitches to hold it together. And I leave a nice little tail on there so we can keep tightening it. You wouldn't want to get halfway around and then this tail slip through and you got to start over. So as, I'm sure you know this, but as you're working through your basket, you're adding stitches, you're going to need to thicken it up with pine needles. So generally to me, getting these started is the hardest part. So because this is tight, it's going to be a little difficult getting it in there. It might fall out. It's totally normal. So I am going to work my way around just attaching these needles, these pine needles, to the center and create the first row. And I'm just going to use, there we lost that pine needle, the basic stitch or the simple stitch. So you don't have a lot to connect to in here, so it gets really hairy, and I'm having an issue this morning. There we go, it's in there. And I will just keep working my way around and show you when I get to the end of it, just using the simple stitch. So you know that when you start a basket, you could wrap the row, which is a good way to make sure everything's really secure. But in this class, I am just going to use the simple stitch because we only have so much time and we want to get through all the other stitches. These little holes are tight. This is one I drilled, so I can't blame anyone else. Okay, I will keep adding pine needles. My goal is to get up to 1/4 of an inch, which is about the width of the center, and then we'll move on to the next stitch. So now you can see I've made it all the way around. I've worked my way up to about 1/4 inch, and that's about the thickness of the center. So you should all know this, but I'm just going over as a little refresher. So I've got 2 drill holes left. I'm pretty secure over here. I am going to clip the tail in a diagonal fashion, maybe, because we want that to lay flat and be almost hidden. Okay, so I'm at the end here, and if I didn't mention it already, and I'm sure you know this, when you add your pine needles, it's the shiny side out because that's the nicer looking side. So we'll make sure that's laying flat in there as we take our last stitch and secure that all down. Okay. This is bent a little weird right there, but it'll hide well. I am just going to go back and make sure this is all nice and snug and tight here. So I don't know if I want to take it. No, I think I have to go over here. So in this instance, sometimes when I start my second row, I'll go through the threads here if I think it will be secure enough. But I am going to try to go down here, and I know it's gonna look thicker, but I think that will be a little bit more solid going through that same hole, which is very tight. I'm surprised I didn't break the needle head, but that will pull this straight down over that tail, and it'll look really clean. Now I'm going to go off camera and just tighten everything up, make sure everything's in place, and that it's looking good, and I'll be right back. So we've gone all the way around, started our basket, gone all the way around. Back looks the same as the front pretty much. Except for, I know this is the back because I taped the tail down. I usually do that and keep it. So the one thing I've noticed with people in beginner classes is we get to talking and people will switch the side of their basket. So then they're trying to work over here as opposed to going to the right. So when you're not familiar with working on baskets and we're visiting, sometimes people go the wrong way and then they have a whole different look. So make sure you're working with your back side down. We're on the second row, and the second row is going to be the wheat, or it's going to be the V stitch, but you could set it up to do the wheat stitch also. So the V stitch, the easiest way to do it, you can go through the needles, which I'm not going to do here because it takes a little longer and it's a little harder on the hands. I am going to go through the top thread here. Hopefully you can see that. I'm not going to pick up both of these. I am just going to pick up here. Top. I did prick the needles a little bit. You go through once. These needles are dampened, so they're working pretty good, but they're still a little stiff. And then you go through twice. And it's just simple as that. Now you have 2 stitches. Then you are going to go to the next thread. Kind of got pulled over a bit. Go through the top of the thread once. Pull it down tight. So I did go around this basket off camera and just tightened up the thread all the way around. I used a little dotting tool to do that, and I've created another video on that if you're interested. I just like to make sure everything's snug before I get started. So then we're on our second stitch. We're going to go through a second time. So this is another good way to make up extra stitches. Now these are going to spread out as we go and we add more thread or more needles. So there's 2 V-stitches. Let's keep working our way around. Going under the thread. Going under the thread again. I'll keep working my way around. So for the V-stitch, setting up for the wheat stitch, it's just going under the same thread twice. And you can pierce the thread and do the V-stitch, and that gives it another look, especially if you're using different materials. So, but for this class, we're just going to try to make it easy and make it around on each stitch within an hour, because we only have 4 hours for the class. So I will continue working on this, adding more needles as I go to make sure that we maintain our 1/4 inch coil. You can see I'm doing this fast because I want to get it done fast. So that's how it's starting to look. V-stitch is a great stitch to add more stitches. So if you're working your way out, the stitches are going to get a little further apart, and you might need to add more stitches to hold your pine needles in. So see how far apart these are? This V-stitch is going to be good to add more stitches, because then you have 2 places to connect to. Okay, I'll work my way around and then come back on camera. Okay, I made it all the way around with a V-stitch. So you will see that if the stitches are close together, the V-stitches end up closer together. And as the basket gets bigger and the coils get thicker, they're more spread apart. So I've changed my color of thread. I meant to do every row a different color, but at any rate, I'll start that now. So now we are going to be working on the tie stitch. So the way that I create it, and I've seen people do it different ways, sometimes it gets a little difficult because this is the hardest stitch I have to teach. But so I usually go back to front, and I want to frame this leg, the straight leg of the V-stitch with the tie stitch. We want to keep it straight. If we do this, it's going to start going diagonally, and then it gets a little wonky. So at this point, if we had time, I would suggest creating another V-stitch, which is called a straight V-stitch, and going off the straight leg. So you have a little more room to work with. But I don't think we're going to have that kind of time. So in this class, we are just going to create the tie stitch with the straight leg of the V-stitch. So I forget this a lot, but we have to go back to front to do this stitch. And I want to come up just on the right side of that straight stitch. And I'm not trying to pick up any thread or needles or anything. I'm just coming through that open space. It makes it a little easier if you're doing the V-stitch. So back to front, up and over. And having 1 arm's length of a new color thread, or just 1 arm's length of thread, just makes it a little easier to deal with. So we're coming from back to front, up on the right side of that straight leg, up and over, and then you're in the back again. Then you come from the back, and I usually go, sometimes I go above that diagonal leg, but sometimes I go below. Whichever way you do it, just keep it consistent. So this is where it's going to get a little difficult because we are using small V's here. If we had the 2 rows, it would be easier, but we'll get it. So then you come back to front on the left side of that straight stitch. And you go up and over again. I don't know why my needles are all falling out. I didn't stick them in far enough. And this is where you hold a little bit of the thread. So you've gone up and over, then you're pulling the thread forward across the middle, go through the coils again, and then make sure you go through that little loop that you formed. We'll do it a few times, and if you've done it in class, it'll make sense. But, and I usually just kind of try to snug it up a little first, then tie it tight. Some people just pull it tight. So then, might be a little hard to see because this is a small basket, but you could see that red down below. So we are sort of encasing, I guess you'd call it. I'll put that back in there. I don't know why these guys are falling out, but okay. Now we will move on to the next straight leg. So these are going to be really close because look at how close those are. But I will do it. I will show you how to do it over on this side too. And when it's more open, you can see a little bit easier. The reason I'm using different colored threads is so you can really see the stitches in this basket. And I'm trying to use bright colored threads. Okay, so again, I'm going to make sure I'm in the middle of the camera. Here we go. And I'm in the back. I want to come on the right side of that straight leg, which is the left leg of the V-stitch. Up and over to the back, and then you're going to come back to front again. And I am going to continue my pattern of putting my needle right above that as opposed to below. Sometimes I do above, below. I don't know. It's just whatever I feel like doing at the moment, I guess. I don't know if there's a rule or not, but okay, so now we are on the left side of that straight stitch in the below row. So up and over. Now this is where you want to hold a little gap here. Make sure you have a loop. You're going to pull it forward, pull the thread forward. And this is where we're going to cross over our 2 threads, go through the middle of the 2 rows of coils, and come out the back. Okay. And pull it through slowly. So see, there's where you're making your tie. So now in this case, we have this extra leg here. We're going to have that extra leg, and it's fine. You just have an extra leg. It's just going to be a different design. So if you did do the straight wheat, you could go up several. Then you have this nice straight leg, and you could start creating the tie stitch. The other way, there's a straight stitch that if you're doing a diagonal leg just all the way around the basket, say you're doing a basic stitch, you can go through and create a straight stitch to set up for your tie stitch. Okay, let's do that one more time. Then I'll work around to the other side of the basket where it's a little bit more open. Back to front. We're coming at the bottom coil, the bottom of the bottom coil. We're coming on that straight leg, going up and over to the back. Then we're coming from the back again. So wherever you place your needle, just try to be consistent. You can go down here if you want to cross over You can just go right here, which is what I have been doing. And we're not going through the needles. It really makes it much easier on the tie stitch. So then up and over again. I just have a habit of holding my string. I like to hold it tight back there. So remember, you have to form your little loop. Just hold it over your finger. Then you're going back down through the center of the 2 coils. You're crossing over. You're going to pull over and cross over. Center of the 2 coils. Go slowly so you don't poke yourself. There's your little loop. Pull your thread through. And you've encased that little red stitch below. Okay. I'll stop here, work my way around to this side because it's more open. It's just, this is where we started the basket, so there weren't a lot of pine needles there yet. But that's what it looks like up close. I'm sure you'll be able to see better when I get around the other side. Okay, let me show you those hand movements again on a more spread out version. So this is what they are looking like. The orange thread is just enclosing the red thread. So again, back to front. We're coming through the bottom coils on the right side of that straight stitch. Then up and over, and then we're coming from the back, trying to get right down in that little corner because I want to come out the V on the other side. I want to come out right between those 2 threads. I'm not trying to pick up any thread. Pull that down snug. Come back up and over. Then we're going to pull it from the right side and cross over those 2 threads. Then go through between the 2 coils. And I am trying not to pick up any pine needles. Come through that little loop that you've held there. Back out, snug it up. So this is what the back is looking like. You have that long diagonal stitch. And there's a stitch that people call the inside out stitch, or the backwards tie stitch. I've actually never done this stitch on the front of a basket. It's always on the back. So one day I'll make a video of that. But that's what it's looking like on the back. This is what it's looking like on the front. So one thing I did want to say, if you, it's better to do a tie stitch on this straight leg, and that's why we set up with the V. And the reason I want to explain that to you is this is a basket I did when I was first learning the tie stitch. And see how if you're using a diagonal leg, what it looks like. It's just kind of off. I mean, looks okay in this basket, but it looks way better here, don't you think? So that's why we're using the straight leg. Okay, you may not need it, but you may. So I'm gonna go over the hand movements again. And of course, you can always just replay the video. Back it up a little bit, replay it till you get the hand movements. And I will have hand movements typed out for you as well on instructions. So, okay, again, we're coming back to front. I know we're going on that far leg, so we're on the right side. So I'm right-handed, but I stitch to the right. A lot of right-handers stitch to the left. So I will do a video to the left as well. But this helps the left-handers, I believe, also. So a lot of my friends stitch to the right because we were all taught that way. So whatever way you do it, I'm sure this will help. So up and over, then we want to come from the back again. I'm coming right down in this corner. Other baskets, I think I was going over there, but I just keep up the same way I did it. And I want to come right out in the bottom of that V. Now, obviously, you don't have to worry about this so much if you are using a straight stitch. You don't have to worry about getting it just right on that side of the V because you'll be going through this little area here and it makes it much easier. So up and over, make sure to hold your little loop, your finger with your little loop. And then you're pulling it, you're going back to the right side, you're pulling it over, and this is where you're making your tie. And I did 1 arm's length of thread. I should have done a little bit more. But now I know. Then you go over, put your needle through that loop, pull it snug. And there you have it. So make sure that you keep adding pine needles. Sometimes you get so caught up in trying to remember the hand movements for the tie stitch, you forget to add pine needles, and then you end up with a really thin row. See how nice and thick it's starting to get. Now, it would probably look better on this basket over here if we had gone more rows. But see, these rows are thinner, so they're closer together. But it's really a practice basket, so it doesn't matter. Okay, thanks for watching. We'll move on to the next stitch now after I get this completed. Okay, this is what it is looking like after we have finished our tie stitch. Now, if you really like the tie stitch and you wanted to continue on, it looks really cool. If you go 3-4 rows with different colors, you know, something that matches up. But this is a practice basket, so we're not going to do that. So now we are on the Indian wrap. The Indian wrap stitch looks like this. So if you complete 3 or 4 rows, you can create the checkerboard effect. And that is just, see, you have this open area between, and then you have the little wraps all around the basket. So if you are planning on completing the checkerboard effect, you need a odd number of wraps and an odd number of just the stitches. So we're not going to work on that today, but maybe another time. I do have videos on that. But this is the Indian wrap. So this is how we're going to do it in the basket, our practice basket. I went ahead and added a different color thread so you can really see what I'm doing and see the difference in the stitches. So usually the stitches below sort of dictate how large your wraps are going to be. I generally stick to about 1/4 inch or so, but really you have to kind of go by the stitches below so that it looks right. And I tend to count my stitches, take one off, add one, whatever. You'll see as we go. If you would like larger wraps, you just wrap clear across 2 of these and attach at each stitch. So you could have like an almost a 1-inch wrap. We're not going to do this in this basket, but you know, it just gives you all kinds of options on what to do next. So the way, I am not going to go through the pine needles, or at least I'm going to try not to. I am just going to go through and pick up just underneath the 2 stitches. So if you go through the pine needles, it's very solid, but it is a little bit harder on your hands and it takes a little bit longer to do. So whatever way you prefer to do it, but in class, this is how we're going to do it. So you've got your single stitch, and then we're going to start our wrap. So this is where my thread got really tangled before, but so snug it up. Let me move some stuff out of the way. I'm making a mess. So I tend to count my stitches just so I have an idea of where I'm going to, or, you know, it kind of just keeps the flow. And I try to keep it similar, but it doesn't always work out that way. But as I'm wrapping, I like to, you know, firm up the stitches, push them together, get them a little tighter. You don't want your pine needles showing through. It just looks kind of bad. It looks a little unkempt, I guess I would call it. So I'm being really careful pulling my thread up because last time I had it in a huge knot. So see, that looks like almost 1/4 of an inch. And that was about 8 stitches. Then I will go ahead and go underneath these 2 stitches to tie it down. Oh. That snugs it down. Now, if you wanted longer wraps, you'd wrap again and then attach here. But I don't want longer wraps. I am going to go to the next stitch, take a stitch. So it's stitch wrap, or whatever form of design you want to create. And again, it would take 3 rows or so to create the checkerboard effect. These needles are a bit stiff. I guess I could have wet them. So then we start wrapping again. And I know I'm going to need about 7 or 8 to get to that next stitch. I need one more. You know why my needles, I need to add needles. They're thinning out a little bit, and I get so busy doing my stitches, I forget to add needles. I like back stitching because you don't have to add more pine needles. But in this case, we're just going to add a few shiny side out, stick them in the middle, thicken it up. There we go. We're going to go right back under. I'll move that thread so you can see better. Right back under. Some people use blunt needles so that they don't poke their pine needles and scar them, or they start shredding or whatever. I haven't had too many problems with that, but my needles do not get very old. So there's a wrap. Now we're going to take a basic stitch, simple stitch, do the same thing, go right under those, pull it through carefully so you don't get all kinds of knots. Then we start wrapping again. You can kind of move them around too. Snug them up. I think I need one more. See, you just want it to look nice and clean. Go under that stitch to attach it to the basket. Snug it down. Add a few more pine needles. Get your straw or your metal gauge on. So that's what it's looking like. So if you want to use the Indian wrap, create the checkerboard effect, I do have other videos on that. You could just look online or ask me to send it to you. I can send it to you on Facebook or something. So then here we go. Again, right under the thread. Pull it snug. Start creating your wrap. So that's about 8 right there. But see, as the basket's getting bigger, it does get a little bit further apart. So you just have to watch it and judge. And then, of course, as you go further out, it's going to stretch out as well. So just keep an eye on it and gauge what you need and make changes appropriately. Here we go. That looks good to me. It's pretty snug there. I'm going to go this way to get under the row. Sometimes I work on stuff upside down. When I was working on my red doll project, oh my God, I worked every which way. It was hard getting everything around that. That was crazy. Okay, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 wraps. I'll take one more stitch, and I think that you will have it by then. And it looks like I could tell these are getting thinner. My straw's getting loose. I need to add some pine needles, get it really going. There we go, right under that. Stitch, snug it down. And I think after this, I'm just gonna take a little break in this video and eat something, dampen these needles, and pin them down. So there's the Indian wrap. Of course, I will go all the way around. And when I get done with that, we're gonna work on the diamond stitch along with the back stitch. Exciting times, guys, exciting times.